We were all afraid for the propaganda against the Jews. And then in the fall 1942, the Jews were arrested. Some had got warning in advance and had escaped. But they were on very unpleasant places. And some came to different homes waiting for a chance to come over to Sweden.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that you personally had 25 Jewish refugees knocking at your doors, so to speak. What did you do? How did they come?
Yeah, it was at the theological seminary when Professor called upon me, and he said that I know a couple, they are Jewish, they are from Vienna in Austria. They came to Norway as refugees before the German invasion. Could you help them to Sweden? And I said immediately, I know about an escape route, and I will do my best. But it was one boy, he was 3 years when this escape occurred. And I had to have him on my back, and sometimes he started to cry and called on her mama. And then I said, "Be silent. The birds had to sleep." Silent. Yeah.
This was a dangerous journey, a dangerous trip. Were you ever scared?
Oh yeah, I am no hero. I was scared.
Were there other members of the clergy involved directly in this, in the transportation of Jewish refugees?
Oh yeah, I am not unique. I am an ordinary pastor and did a job. It was obvious to me to take that job when I was asked to it.
In 1942, Sweden was deeply committed to maintaining its neutrality. News of the sudden arrest and deportation of Norwegian Jews deeply alarmed some of its church leaders. Mrs. Ingrid Segerstedt Wiberg remembers attending a special prayer service by Pastor Olle Nystedt at the Gothenburg Cathedral.
Well, in 1942, we got by the news that many Jews were sent from Norway, deported to Poland by the Nazis. 800 Jews were sent by ships to Poland. And then Mr. Nystedt, the domprosten here, he heard about it and he said, "I will have a special ceremony for this occasion. We must pray for the Jews and try to help those who are left." And so here we were here in the church. It was overcrowded for all kind of people, poor and rich, Jews and Gentiles. All were here. I was standing all the time, for I couldn't get a seat. And of course we were crying. And then he said, "The stones will cry out if we do not talk." And we promised, all of us, to do what we could to save the rest. It was such a terrible time. We knew that they were hunting Jews, our friends in Norway, and that the Norwegian church was trying to help them and to save them. People went out, risking their lives to help them, Norwegian and Swedes. And then, as Mr. Nystedt spoke here, the Swedish church started to, in order to help them, to save what was possible to save. Those who were left, the Norwegians spoke about two kind of parcels, the small parcels and the big parcels. The small parcels were the children who were sent over the border. They had to go sometimes alone, cross the border alone. And then the other parcels, they went as they could, passing the border. It was an exciting time and a different time. But of course, everybody wanted to do something. Every Swede did understand at last what was going on. And we could save some of them. But many were lost in Theresienstadt, Auschwitz and so on, Ravensbrück. We will never forget it.
By mid-1943, most of the Norwegian Jews who were in hiding had been taken across the border into Sweden. In August of that year, the situation in Denmark changed dramatically. An escalation of sabotage against the German war effort resulted in a German order to the Danish government to execute captured members of the Danish resistance. The government refused and resigned. Parliament was dissolved and was replaced by German SS rule. With direction from Berlin, the Gestapo quickly developed plans to capture and deport Denmark's 8,000 Jews. But a German diplomat, Georg Duckwitz, learned of the plans and advised Danish political leaders to quickly warn the Jewish community.
I was 14. I was a child among 5 children. My father was a rabbi. And since the chief rabbi at the time had already been arrested, my father was somehow acting as the rabbi of the community. And it was to our house, among 2 or 3 others, that the message was originally brought. A message that came the night before the eve of Rosh Hashanah, of the Jewish New Year. And it said that the night after Rosh Hashanah, which was 3 nights later, there would be a raid. Every Jew had to leave his or her home, had to hide. Nobody knew for how long. There was a general feeling that the Germans in Denmark were somehow opposed to the whole matter, but this was a direct order from Berlin, and we had to go into hiding. It was, as I said, Jewish New Year, and if the rabbi left home for that occasion, something had to be really bad. That message many people did understand. We ended up, since we were a big family, we ended up in the house of a priest outside Copenhagen, almost 100 kilometers outside Copenhagen. With the thought that he could perhaps let us stay in various other houses for people that lived in his parish, but he insisted that we should all stay with him. We were advised not to go the usual routes in northern Zealand that bring us the shortest way to Sweden, because at that time these ways had been more or less locked by the German patrols and were too dangerous in any case. So we went to the southern part of Denmark, which is a much longer way to Sweden, but apparently it was told it was safer.
Fewer than 3 miles separate Elsinore, Denmark, from Helsingborg, Sweden. Fearful of German patrols, it was considered an impossible wartime crossing until the crisis of October 1943. For the Jews of Denmark fleeing the Nazi threat, there were no alternatives. Having decided to risk crossing the sea, they then had to find other Danes willing to take the risk to help them. Mrs. Henny Sunde was 22 years old. She worked with her father, a commodore in the Danish Navy.
And one day I was called on board this boat, The boat had a crew of 4 men. I knew them very well. They were very good friends of me. And they asked me, they told me that they were going to do something, but they had to have my help. They had found out that Gather 3 must be very good for, rescuing Jews, because it was allowed to leave the Danish coast and go out to this Draughten lighthouse, as it was called. So they asked me, could I go and talk to my father and ask him if the crew could more or less borrow the boat for this purpose. I was not going to mention the purpose to my father. I just said to my father, could you be kind enough not to make any objections if Gather 3 does not sail on its usual route, and if it does not sail on this the usual time, it has to leave the harbor, and just don't ask any questions. And my father did not ask any questions at all. He knew perfectly well, but he was not to know officially, because as a head of the Danish Lighthouse Service, it would have been awful if he was involved in anything illegal. We had to find the Jews, which was not very difficult, because there were many Jews, and everybody knew some Jews who knew others, and they had all left their homes and gone to see Christian friends. And we got hold of a lot of the Jews, and we found near where the boat was lying, near the harbor, we found some very nice Danish families who were willing to take the chance and take the Jewish families into their homes until we could get them over, because you couldn't get them all over in 1 or 2 days. And we had borrowed a warehouse, and we put the Jews on the loft in this warehouse about 1 o'clock at night. And there they stayed during the night, because the boat could not leave till 7 o'clock in the morning. That was their official time to leave the harbor.
Hiding and protecting Denmark's Jewish population until boats could be arranged for the voyage to Sweden involved thousands of Danes. Within a few weeks, more than 7,000 Jewish men, women and children were helped to find their way to Danish seaports. Some went by train to Esbjerg, where they were met by townspeople.
I was 17 at the time, and still it's many years, 50 years ago, but I remember exactly when people called me. For instance, the station master said he got some people standing at the station, and he thought that I should come and fetch them. And then I went up to the station. I didn't know the people waiting for me, and they didn't know me. But we found each other, and then we walked from the station through the passes. Sometimes I was going to bring them to a house where they should stay for a night or two until we were able to ship them to Sweden. Here's one of the places from where the refugees was sent off to Sweden.